Listen, I plunged into the archives, studied tons of documents, reports, and memoirs, and now I will tell you a story that shocked even me. This is not just a story about metal and welded seams. It is a story of a brilliant breakthrough deliberately erased from memory, the story of a ghost tank, without which the entire might of Soviet, and now Russian, armor would not exist. Brew a strong cup of tea, get comfortable, and don't skip ahead. You definitely haven't heard anything like this. And yes, at the end, I will ask you for two very important actions, a subscription and a comment. Without them, our shared story on this channel may end. Let's go. Main body. Imagine the autumn of 1943. The smoke from the fires has not yet cleared over the fields of the Kursk Bulge. The earth, scarred by the tracks of panthers and tigers, still smells of burnt steel and gunpowder. Soviet tankers, heroes who survived this hell, are reporting not only on their feats, they are reporting on problems. Their legendary T-34s, these symbols of national resilience, meeting the new German nightmares head-on, are burning. They burn often. The frontal armor no longer saves them, and the famous speed and maneuver lose their meaning when one accurate shot from afar decides everything. And in these conditions, in a closed design bureau, a group of engineers led by a genius whose name is known to everyone connected with tanks, Alexander Morozov, is looking at the blueprints of the T-34. And they make a seditious, almost heretical conclusion. That's it. Further modernization is useless. A dead end. Let's grasp the courage of this. The T-34 is more than a tank. It is a symbol of victory, an icon, a sacred cow. To say that its potential is exhausted in the midst of war is to risk not only a career but much more. But Morozov and his team were engineers, not ideologists. They saw the numbers. They saw that each new reinforcement of armor or installation of a more powerful gun on the old platform led to an avalanche-like increase in mass, overloading of the chassis, and cramped conditions for the crew. The tank was turning into an engineering Frankenstein. A clean slate was needed, and this clean slate received the index T-44. Here I want to pause and give you the first historical reference so that you understand the full scale of the feat. The fact is that in the middle of the war, the Soviet industry had a slogan: "Do not stop the conveyor." Any change leading to a decrease in production rates was akin to death. The transition from the T-34 to the T-34-85 was a huge stress for the factories. And here they are proposing to create a completely new tank, with a new layout, new suspension, and a new hull. It was tantamount to ordering a plane flying at full speed to change its engines in midair. And yet, the bet was placed on the future. This is an incredible decision that speaks to the foresight of the Soviet leadership in military technical matters. So what was the revolution? Not in the gun at first, it was the old 85mm one. And not in the engine, it was the familiar V2, only slightly improved. The revolution was in the packaging. Imagine a shoebox. This is the T-34. It is stuffed with an engine, ammunition for grown men. Everything is tight. Everything is cramped. To put something new in, you need to throw something out. Morozov acted differently. He took and turned the box sideways. More precisely, he turned the engine sideways. Transverse placement of the V-44 engine. Just 3 words behind which lies titanic work. Before this, all Soviet tanks had a longitudinal layout. The engine stood along the hull like a banana in a peel, taking up a huge amount of space. By turning it sideways, the engineers performed magic. Shortened the hull by a whole 300mm. It might seem like nonsense, but in tank building, every centimeter is kilograms of armor. Freed up a colossal volume in the center of the vehicle. This volume was used for what every T-34 tanker dreamed of, a normal fighting compartment. The crew ceased to be crammed into an iron box. They got space to work, to breathe. The volume increased to almost 3 cubic meters, the level of the best Western tanks of that time. Shifted the turret to the center of gravity. This is a key point. On the T-34, the driver sat on the left, and to his right was the machine gunner. His hatch weakened the frontal armor plate, creating that very Achilles heel. On the T-44, the driver got his place right in the bow of the hull, under the cover of the thickest armor, and his hatch moved to the roof. The front became smooth, monolithic, solid. No cutouts, no weak points. A solid steel wall. And all this saved mass and volume was without hesitation invested in armor. The front hull, a solid 120 millimeters, set at an incredible angle of 60 degrees. This was a qualitative leap. Let me give you a simple example from school geometry. Sloped armor increases its effective thickness. 120 millimeters at a 60-degree angle is almost 250 millimeters in equivalent. Such a front was practically impenetrable for most German guns at the end of the war at real combat distances. Now let's do a little economic and historical analysis. Why do I call the T-44 a post-trophy tank? Because by 44, Soviet engineers had already thoroughly studied captured Panthers and Tigers. They did not copy them, that's a dead end. But they took the best ideas. From the Panther, the idea of rational armor sloping and a balanced layout for accurate shooting on the move. But they did it simpler, more technologically advanced, and more reliable. The German Maybach was an engineering masterpiece but capricious and complex to maintain. Our V-44 ran on any diesel fuel, endured unthinkable overloads, and was repaired in the field. It was a philosophy in metal. Efficiency multiplied by survivability and mass production. Now for the most painful part. Why was it forgotten? Why is it a ghost tank? The history of its service is a drama in several acts. Act 1. Secrecy. The T-44 began production in July 44. By the end of the war, about 190 vehicles had been made. And you know what? Not one of them fired a single shot at the enemy. Just think about it. The time of the fiercest offensives, the thunder of victory salutes, and these, the most advanced medium tanks in the world at that moment, stand deep in the rear, guarded by reinforced patrols. Why? The answer is terrible and simple. The Soviet command was desperately afraid that the new vehicle, this embodiment of all post-war ideas, would fall into the hands of the Allies or, God forbid, be knocked out and captured by the Germans for study. It was too valuable. Its armor, its layout, this was the map for the next 15 years of tank building. It was impossible to risk such a map. So the T-44 turned from a combat vehicle into a strategic secret, a ghost tank. Act 2. Indecision. The war ended. The mighty IS-3 appeared. What to do with the T-44? They tried mounting the huge 122mm gun from a heavy tank on it. The result was the monster T-44 122. Cramped with a meager ammunition load, with a monstrous recoil that literally tore the turret off its race. A failure. They tried to install a new long-barreled 100mm gun. Also a failure, the tank was overweight and unbalanced. And here Morozov makes a second brilliant move. He did not torture a successful platform. He took it as a basis and created a new tank, the T-54. He increased the turret ring, installed a new 100mm gun, and strengthened the armor. And this became the greatest success. But the shadow of the predecessor dissolved in the rays of the descendant's glory. NATO for many years simply did not distinguish early T-54s from T-44s, designating them all as T-54 Model 47. Act 3. Oblivion and rebirth. It seemed the fate of the T-44 was sealed. But no. In the 60s, when more advanced vehicles were already in service, someone at the General Staff remembered the hundreds of sturdy, reliable T-44s gathering dust in warehouses. They were not sent for scrap. They were modernized. They installed engines, observation devices, and weapon stabilizers from the T-54. The result was the T-44M and T-44S. And then, according to some often classified data, they finally smelled gunpowder. There are persistent rumors that it was these modernized 44s that took part in suppressing the Hungarian uprising of 1956. Foreign observers then reported in bewilderment about unknown Soviet tanks with a smooth front, without a frontal cutout. That was them. Ghosts emerging from the shadows for a brief but terrible moment. Later, they were converted into tractors and training vehicles. They served faithfully until complete wear and tear. But their true significance is not in these episodes. So why is the T-44 important for you and me today? Because it is the cornerstone. It is that very missing puzzle piece in history without which the picture does not come together. Everything we know today about the Soviet and Russian school of tank building. A powerful balanced front, compact layout, a huge turret ring, torsion bar suspension, a focus on mass production and maintainability. All this first came together in the T-44. It was the first to prove that one can be technological without being complex, that one can be protected without being clumsy, that the crew is not expendable material but the tank's main weapon, and human conditions must be created for it. When you look at modern Russian tanks at parades or in reports, remember, in their iron hearts beats the DNA of that very forgotten ghost tank, created in the fire of the most terrible war by geniuses who thought not only about victory but also about what would come after. It did not become a legend like the T-34. It did not become a world hit like the T-54. It became the foundation. And the foundation, as you know, always remains in the shadow of what is built upon it. But without it, the majestic building would collapse. That's the story. A story of engineering courage, strategic foresight, and the bitter injustice of oblivion. And now, those very actions I asked for at the beginning. First, if the story hooked you, if you want me to continue digging up such forgotten but key pages in the history of technology, subscribe to this channel. Your subscription is a signal that such truth is needed, that memory is important. There are many of us already, but ahead are the most interesting topics, about flying tanks, about secret Cold War projects, about how fateful decisions were made. Without your support, this channel may simply disappear in the information noise. Don't let that happen. Click subscribe right now. And second, no less important, write in the comments. What do you think about the T-44? Maybe you have your own story related to it? Or just write about what other unfairly forgotten piece of technology you want to hear the next big story about. Your comment is not just letters. It is our live connection, the continuation of the dialogue. It is what I write all this for. Let's together return from oblivion the names and machines that deserve it. I'm waiting for each of you in the comments and on the subscriber list. Let's go.